Thursday of this past week, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi met with the Holy Father in Rome. Both the Vatican and the Speaker released versions of what transpired within, as neither reporters nor photographers were allowed in. To discuss what was said and what it means, joining us from Birmingham, Alabama, is Bishop Robert Baker, the Bishop of Birmingham. Thank you for being here, Your Excellency.
Greetings, Raymond. Good to be with you.
I want to look at these two statements. Now, we read the Pope's statement earlier. I'll go through it again. But, you know, I'm going to read, I think, Speaker Pelosi's statement first, and then allow you to sort of unpack what the Pope said. As you heard earlier, the Pope was saying, the Vatican rather said, the Pope used this opportunity to lay out the Church's moral teaching, as it's been since the very earliest days of the Church, that human life begins at conception and that all of us are enjoined to protect human life. Speaker Pelosi had this to say: "It is with great joy that my husband Paul and I met with His Holiness Pope Benedict XVI today. In our conversation, I had the opportunity to praise the Church's leadership in fighting poverty, hunger, and global warming, as well as the Holy Father's dedication to religious freedom and his upcoming trip and message to Israel. I was proud to show His Holiness a photograph of my family's papal visit in the 1950s, as well as a recent picture of our children and grandchildren." That's it. That's the whole message from Speaker Pelosi. I think we missed something there in the translation here. What do you think, Bishop?
Well, Raymond, we can kind of unpack the Pope's statement. Of course, we were not present. We were not behind closed doors, so we don't know all that went on in that private conversation with Speaker Pelosi. And certainly I don't speak on behalf of the Pope, but I think it's interesting to see what his comments were in the aftermath of that gathering. And we can kind of exegete that statement, interpret it ourselves. And there's some clear messages that are in there. It's very carefully honed, but I think the Pope had a very strong message.
Yeah, I'll read it out, and you'll notice there's no mention here of global warming or the Pelosi picture from the 1950s, but maybe the Pope missed that portion. It says, "His Holiness took the opportunity to speak of the requirements of the natural moral law and the Church's consistent teaching on the dignity of human life from conception to natural death, which enjoins all Catholics, and especially legislators, jurists, and those responsible for the common good of society, to work in cooperation with all men and women of goodwill in creating a just system of laws capable of protecting human life at all stages of its development." Your thoughts, Bishop?
Well, Raymond, he works off the natural moral law argument, first of all, which touches people of all goodwill, people of goodwill in any religious background. So he starts there, and then he moves into the Church's consistent teaching. Consistent is an important word, and that answers Speaker Pelosi's argument that this has not been a consistent teaching of the Church. It has been. Also interesting to say that
remember last September on Meet the Press, she infamously said that the Church had not come down and directly defined when life began. And to be truthful, this isn't the Church's place. Science has already told us life begins at conception. We now know that's an established fact. It has nothing to do with really being Catholic or not, correct?
That's correct. Any first-year biology student would know that. So, and any first-year religion course student would know that in a good Catholic high school as well, what the Church is teaching is on that point. So this has been a consistent teaching of the Church, and that's really not up for grabs. It's interesting that he also indicates that this teaching enjoins all Catholics. In other words, this involves Catholic identity. One cannot just kind of push this teaching on the side as a peripheral issue. It's a priority belief. So Catholic identity is tied to the issue of being pro-life. I think it's interesting, he says also, that this enjoins legislators, jurists, and those responsible for the common good of society. He says especially them. So, those who argue, well, we don't push this issue on people in public civil life. As a matter of fact, he says we should. Especially this applies to people in those positions of authority. So he is engaging the world of politics with that especially.
how important is this message, coming as it does directly from the Holy Father? And we should say this is a bit of a violation of protocol, Bishop Baker. Normally, the Vatican will have these private meetings with heads of state. One line will be released from the Vatican that says, the Pope met with Ambassador so-and-so or Prime Minister so-and-so. They exchanged gifts. It was a cordial meeting. There are no details on the conversation exchanged. Yet in this case, Pelosi hadn't left the building yet, and the Vatican released this document ahead of her and kind of laid out exactly what the Pope discussed in very explicit terms. And as you said, this wasn't crafted lightly. What is its importance?
Well, everywhere the Pope goes, he touches on the issues of life, and he wants to focus in on the priority concerns of the Church in addressing this moral issue, which is the principal moral issue of our day. And it seems that society has reacted to his message when he came here to the United States and in other countries with kind of an indifferent attitude. Well, it doesn't apply to me. And I think he wanted people to know it does apply to everyone, but those who call themselves Catholic in a special way should be stepping forward and taking a very strong stand for life. And he wanted to get that message out, that he shared that particular message with Speaker Pelosi.
There's a question here. Over successive years, we have seen both Republicans and Democrats in the United States, pro-choice Catholics all, make this argument that, well, I'm personally opposed, but my job requires me to enforce the law and to allow people to make their own choices. I think that argument was put to rest a long time ago. The latest argument is, well, the Church really hasn't decided when life begins, so since we don't know that, I'm supporting abortion, and that's perfectly fine. I think the Pope has closed the door on that definitively, don't you?
Well, I would say he had done this a long time ago. The Church has a long time ago, and I think you interviewed Archbishop Chaput in a beautiful book, Render to Caesar, how the Church had engaged the world of politics on those very points, that this is a major moral issue. We don't push Catholic teaching lightly on all issues. We don't move in, but on this one we do, because the ramifications are so great for a society. We're talking about the taking of human life. So anybody who stands back in kind of a passive way and doesn't put forth this message is, in effect, endorsing that position. And so the Church has an obligation to speak strongly. It has consistently, and the Pope did it in a very clear way with Speaker Pelosi.
Bishop Baker, what would be the process here? I mean, this isn't just about Speaker Pelosi, and since she made those infamous comments several weeks ago, there's a bit of a really new reportage on this story, and it's related. What we've discovered, there was a website, pewsitter.com, which reported this week that Nancy Pelosi met with Archbishop Niederauer, her Archbishop in San Francisco, quietly on February 8th. You'll remember after those initial comments, he invited her to a conversation. We are told the conversation was about her support of abortion and her insistence that she's a loyal member of the Church. Pelosi spokesman Brendan Daly said following the meeting that it was cordial and pleasant, a fair exchange, and good. Now, when pressed on whether good meant she'd changed her position on abortion and gotten in line with the Church teaching, Daly said, "You won't see that happening. She's not changing her position on abortion," end quote. What happens now, Bishop Baker? I mean, and we needn't talk specifically about Speaker Pelosi, but when a politician has been in conversation with their bishop, corrected and warned about where they're headed, and then the Holy Father himself corrects them, if they don't change course, what is the remedy left to the Church?
Well, I would like to start with what I'm doing in Birmingham. It's okay. We have a prayer campaign going and a fasting campaign going for the season of Lent. And there's a little prayer I've composed to pray for a change of heart on the part of people like Speaker Pelosi, Catholics, but people who are not Catholic as well, from our president on down. I think we need to be prayer warriors, first of all, and principally there. We have the season of Lent. It's a great opportunity. I have a little prayer that we composed for this occasion that speaks to this issue, And I've asked all the Catholics of Birmingham to pray that at the conclusion of the general intercessions beginning on Ash Wednesday and continue all through Lent. And then I've asked for people to fast. I think that we have to realize that we're not just dealing with human response, we're dealing with demonic efforts behind the scene, and we need to